Don't touch me." Her voice was flat. Not scared. Not pleading. A warning. The contractor laughed, his hand still gripping her wrist in the dim corridor. His two colleagues blocked both ends of the hallway. The security cameras had been under maintenance for 3 weeks. "Relax, sweetheart. Nobody's coming." What he didn't know, the woman in hospital scrubs wasn't a nurse. She was a Navy SEAL, and 12 seconds later, one man was unconscious. One had a dislocated shoulder, and the third was on his knees, his own phone recording his confession. Before we show you how the trap collapsed and an entire military contractor empire got exposed from the inside out, hit that subscribe button and drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. Because this one didn't get saved. It got corrected. The C-17 touched down at 0347 hours wheels, screaming against the runway like they were trying to wake the dead. The cargo hold was cold, the seats hard, and the only other passenger was a staff sergeant who'd been snoring since Germany. Lieutenant Commander Mara Sinclair didn't sleep. She never slept on transports. 23 years in naval special operations had taught her that rest was earned, not stolen, and she hadn't earned anything yet. She was 51 years old. Her hair was pulled back, tight, streaked with silver she'd stopped hiding years ago. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were clear, and her service record was so classified that most of the people she'd worked with over the years didn't even know her real name. But today, she wasn't Lieutenant Commander Sinclair. Today, she was nurse practitioner Helen Marsh, a mid-career medical professional with a forgettable resume and an unremarkable face. The kind of woman who got assigned to overseas logistics bases because someone had to fill the slot. The kind of woman nobody would look at twice. That was the point. Camp Resolute sprawled across 40 acres of sand-colored buildings and chain-link fencing, a joint military contractor medical logistics hub that serviced 3 different theaters of operation. On paper, it was a supply depot. In practice, it was a small city with its own politics, its own power structures, and its own secrets. Mara knew all of this before she landed. What she didn't know was which secrets were killing people. 3 women in 6 months, all medical personnel, all transferred out under emergency circumstances, all refusing to talk about why. One of them had tried to kill herself 2 weeks after returning stateside. The Navy had noticed. NCIS had been quietly investigating for 4 months, getting nowhere. The base commander was cooperative, but useless. The contractor staff was polite, but impenetrable. And every lead they followed dead-ended into paperwork and procedural excuses. So they sent Mara, not as an investigator, not as an officer, as bait. She'd volunteered for the assignment herself over the objections of her commanding officer, who'd pointed out that she was too senior, too valuable, and too damn stubborn to be put in harm's way for an operation that might yield nothing. Mara had smiled at that. "If there's nothing there," she'd said, "then I'll be perfectly safe." He hadn't argued after that. He knew her well enough to know that arguing was pointless. The first person Mara met at Camp Resolute was a contractor named Danny Reeves. 24 years old, nervous energy, cheap haircut. He was waiting at the processing station with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nurse Marsh," he said, checking her name against his list. "That's me. Welcome to Camp Resolute. I'm Danny. I'll be showing you around getting you settled." Mara nodded, letting herself look tired. It wasn't hard. She was tired. The flight had been long. The mission was uncertain, and she was about to spend the next several weeks pretending to be someone she wasn't while hunting for evidence that might not exist. "Long flight?" Danny asked, reaching for her bag. She let him take it. "Long enough? Yeah, the transport schedules are rough, but you'll like it here. Good people, good food. Well, decent food. Better than some places. He was talking too much, filling the silence because silence made him uncomfortable. Mara filed that away. Nervous people talked. Nervous people revealed things they didn't mean to reveal. "How long have you been here?" she asked. 18 months. Started in supply coordination, but now I'm mostly in admin. Mr. Cross likes to keep things flexible." "Mr. Cross?" Danny's smile flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough. "Vincent Cross. He runs the contractor side of things. Aegis Medical Solutions. You'll meet him soon. He likes to personally welcome all the new medical staff." "That's thoughtful." "Yeah. He's a thoughtful guy." The pause before thoughtful was interesting. Mara didn't push it. Not yet. The base was larger than she'd expected, and more segmented. Military personnel occupied the eastern quadrant, contractors, the western. The medical facilities sat in the middle, theoretically neutral ground, but Mara noticed that the contractor logos were everywhere, and the military insignia were not. Danny walked her through the main corridors, pointing out the cafeteria, the fitness center, the recreation rooms. His narration was practiced like a tour guide who'd done this 100 times and stopped caring around number 50. "Medical supply is through there," he said, gesturing toward a set of double doors. "That's where you'll be spending most of your time. Inventory management, quality control, that kind of thing." "And through there?" Mara asked, pointing to a corridor that branched off to the left. The lights were dimmer there. A sign on the wall read, "Renovation in progress. Authorized personnel only." Danny's pace didn't slow, but his voice did. "That's the East Wing. It's been under renovation for a while. Structural issues. Nobody goes in there." "How long is a while? Few months, maybe longer. I don't really keep track." He was lying. His shoulders had tensed, and he'd shifted his clipboard to his other hand, a self-soothing gesture. Mara had interrogated enough people to recognize the signs. "Must be serious structural issues," she said lightly. "Yeah, must be." He didn't elaborate. She didn't ask. But she made a mental note of the corridor's location, the quality of the lighting, and the fact that the "Authorized Personnel Only" sign looked brand new, while everything else in the building looked weathered and worn. Her quarters were small, but functional. Single bed, single desk, single window overlooking a parking lot full of military vehicles. The bathroom was down the hall, shared with the rest of the female medical staff on the floor. There were only 4 of them. In a facility that serviced 3 theaters of operation and processed millions of dollars in medical supplies every month, there were only 4 female nurses in the entire residential wing. Mara unpacked slowly, taking inventory of her room, while her mind took inventory of everything else she'd observed. The nervous contractor. The renovating wing. The absence of women in a profession dominated by them. Something was wrong here. She could feel it the way she'd felt ambushes in the field, not through evidence but through instinct. The air was wrong. The silences were wrong. The way Danny had avoided her eyes when she asked about the East Wing was wrong. She was still unpacking when someone knocked on her door. The woman on the other side was younger than Mara, maybe 35, with dark circles under her eyes and a uniform that hung on her like she'd lost weight recently. Her name tag read, WBBT, Specialist. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm Tanya. I'm next door. I just wanted to, I don't know, welcome you, I guess." "Thank you." Mara stepped back, opening the door wider. "Would you like to come in?" Tanya hesitated. Her eyes darted down the hallway, checking both directions, before she nodded and slipped inside. "I won't stay long," she said quickly. I wanted to give you some advice, since you're new." "I appreciate that. Don't go to the East Wing. Ever. For any reason. Even if someone asks you to." Mara kept her expression neutral. Danny mentioned it's under renovation. Tanya laughed. It was a bitter sound, hollow and humorless. Yeah, renovation. That's what they call it. What would you call it? The younger woman's eyes met hers, and for a moment Mara saw something there that she recognized. She'd seen it in the eyes of prisoners of war, in the eyes of survivors, in the eyes of people who had been through something terrible and weren't sure they'd ever come out the other side. I would call it a trap, Tanya said quietly. And once you're in it, you don't get out. She was gone before Mara could respond, slipping back into the hallway and closing the door behind her with barely a sound. Mara sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, after that staring at the wall. She'd come here looking for evidence, for documentation, for the kind of proof that could be presented in a courtroom and used to destroy careers and end criminal enterprises. But evidence was cold. Evidence was distant. Evidence didn't have dark circles under its eyes and a voice that trembled when it spoke. Tanya Webb wasn't evidence. She was a victim. And somewhere in this base, there were more like her. Mara had spent 23 years hunting enemies of the United States. She'd killed men in 11 countries, rescued hostages from 4, and completed missions that would never appear in any official record. But this was different. The enemies here weren't foreign fighters or terrorist cells. They were Americans, contractors, people who wore the same flag on their shoulders and collected paychecks from the same government, people who had learned that power and isolation and the right kind of smile could make them untouchable. They were wrong about that. Nobody was untouchable. Not when Mara Sinclair was in the room. She met Vincent Cross the next morning at the daily operations briefing. He was exactly what she'd expected, mid-40s, expensive watch, perfect teeth. The kind of man who'd learned early that charm was a weapon and had been wielding it ever since. He shook hands with everyone, remembered names, made jokes that landed just right. When he reached Mara, his smile widened. "Nurse Marsh, welcome to Camp Resolute. Danny tells me you're settling in well." "The accommodations are comfortable," she said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. Practiced. "Good, good. We try to take care of our people here. Medical staff especially. You're the backbone of this operation. Can't keep the troops healthy without you." "I appreciate that. If you need anything at all, my door is always open. We're a family here. We look out for each other." The word family landed wrong. Too smooth, too rehearsed. Mara smiled back at him, letting her expression convey nothing but polite gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Cross. I'm sure I'll feel right at home." He patted her shoulder, a gesture that lasted half a second too long, and moved on to the next person. Mara watched him work the room. He was good, genuinely good, the kind of predator who'd spent years perfecting his camouflage. But she'd hunted predators before, and she was better. The first week passed in a blur of routine. Mara worked her shifts in the medical supply wing, counting inventory, checking expiration dates, filing reports that nobody would ever read. She kept her head down, and her ears open, learning the rhythms of the base, the hierarchies, the unspoken rules. She learned that the military commander, Colonel Harris, was technically in charge, but practically irrelevant. Every decision of consequence went through Cross. She learned that the female staff avoided certain corridors after dark, especially the one that led to the East Wing. She learned that the anonymous reporting system, the one that was supposed to allow personnel to flag harassment or misconduct, showed 0 submissions in the past 2 years. 0. In a facility with hundreds of staff rotating through every month, not a single person had filed a single complaint about anything. That wasn't possible. That wasn't even statistically plausible. Unless the system wasn't actually anonymous. Unless someone was monitoring it. Unless the people who might have used it knew that using it would make things worse. Mara filed that information away with everything else. Building her case. Mapping the terrain. Waiting. On her 8th day at Camp Resolute, she found what she was looking for. It was late past 2200 hours, and the medical wing was quiet. Most of the day, staff had gone to their quarters. The night shift was skeleton crew, 2 nurses and a pharmacist, who spent most of his time in the break room watching soccer on his phone. Mara had volunteered to stay late, citing a desire to familiarize herself with the inventory systems. Nobody questioned it. Nobody cared. She was alone in the supply room when she heard voices in the corridor outside. Male voices. Laughing. She moved to the doorway and listened. Said she'd be down here until midnight. Something about a special project. Perfect. Cross wants it handled tonight, before the colonel's inspection next week. What about the cameras? Same as always. Danny's got them covered. The voices faded. Footsteps moving away. Mara's pulse didn't quicken. Her breathing didn't change. She'd heard conversations like this before, in different languages, in different countries. The specifics varied, but the intent was always the same. Someone was being hunted. She checked her watch. 22:17 hours. Then she followed the voices. The east wing was darker than she remembered, the renovation lights casting long shadows across empty corridors. The smell was different here, dust, and something chemical, like cleaning solution used to cover something worse. Mara moved silently, her footsteps making no sound on the concrete floor. 23 years of training didn't disappear just because she was wearing scrubs instead of tactical gear. She heard them before she saw them. 3 men at the far end of the corridor clustered around a door. One of them was Danny Reeves. The other 2 she didn't recognize, contractors based on their uniforms. All of them were facing away from her, focused on something inside the room. "Come on," one of them said, his voice carrying in the silence. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." A woman's voice responded, high and frightened. "Please, I just want to go back to my quarters. Please." "That's not how this works, sweetheart. You got the invitation. You came to the East Wing. Now you play along, or—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Mara had seen enough. She stepped into the corridor, her footsteps deliberately loud, now announcing her presence. All 3 men turned. Danny's face went pale. "Nurse Marsh, what are you doing here?" "I heard a noise," Mara said calmly. "Thought someone might need help." The larger of the 2 contractors, a man with a shaved head and a neck like a fire hydrant, stepped toward her. "This area is closed. Renovation. You need to leave." "I can see that. But I also heard someone asking to go back to her quarters. That sounds like someone who needs help." "She's fine. Just a misunderstanding. Go back to your room." Mara didn't move. "I'd like to hear that from her." The contractor's expression shifted. Something flickered behind his eyes. Annoyance, calculation, opportunity. "You're new here, aren't you?" "Does that matter? It means you don't know how things work. So let me explain." He took another step toward her, close enough now that she could smell the alcohol on his breath. When someone tells you to leave, you leave. When someone tells you to forget what you saw, you forget it. That's how you stay safe. That's how you stay employed. That's how you go home at the end of your rotation with your record intact and your reputation clean. And if I don't? He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Then things get complicated. Behind him, Danny shifted nervously. The 3rd contractor had disappeared into the room, presumably to handle whatever was happening inside. Mara looked at the man in front of her. Really looked at him. He was big, probably 240 pounds, and he carried himself like someone who was used to intimidating people with his size alone. He had no idea who he was talking to. "Let me tell you something," she said quietly. "I've been doing this job for a long time, and I've learned that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who prey on the weak because it makes them feel strong, and there are people who protect the weak because strength means nothing if you don't use it for something good." She took a step toward him. He blinked, surprised. "I'm the second kind? And right now you're standing between me and someone who needs help. So you have exactly 5 seconds to move, or I'm going to move you myself." He laughed. "Lady, I don't know what you think you're—" He reached for her arm, and the world changed. The movement was so fast that Danny didn't even see it happen. One moment the big contractor was reaching for the new nurse. The next moment he was on the ground, his arm twisted behind his back at an angle that made Danny's stomach turn, and the nurse, no, not a nurse, she couldn't possibly be just a nurse, was kneeling on his spine with her knee pressed into his kidney. The contractor screamed. "Don't touch me," she said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "I warned you." Danny's legs wouldn't move. His brain was screaming at him to run to get help to do something, but his body was frozen in place, locked by a terror he didn't fully understand. The woman looked up at him. Her eyes were cold, professional. "Danny, go into that room and bring out whoever is in there, now." I can't. Mr. Cross isn't here." "I am. And in about 30 seconds this man's shoulder is going to dislocate. Permanently. So unless you want to explain to a military tribunal why you stood there and watched, I suggest you move." Danny moved. He stumbled into the room and found Specialist Amy Chen backed into a corner, her uniform torn at the shoulder, tears streaming down her face. The third contractor was standing over her belt, already unbuckled. "Get away from her," Danny heard himself say. The contractor turned confused. "What? Get away from her? Now, something's happening. Something's wrong." He didn't wait for a response. He grabbed Amy's arm and pulled her toward the door, past the contractor, past the threshold, into the corridor, where everything had changed. The big contractor was still on the ground, whimpering. The woman who called herself Nurse Marsh was standing now, her posture relaxed, but ready like a coiled spring waiting to release. Amy Chen collapsed against Danny, sobbing. "It's okay," he heard himself say. "It's okay. You're safe now." The words felt hollow in his mouth. Nothing was okay. Nothing had been okay for a long time. And he'd known it. He'd known it every time he disabled the cameras. Every time he scheduled female staff for late shifts in isolated areas. Every time he looked the other way because looking the other way was easier than looking at what was happening. He'd known. And he'd done nothing. The woman's voice cut through his thoughts. "Danny," he looked up. "I need you to take her to the medical wing. Stay with her. Don't let anyone near her until I come for you. Can you do that?" He nodded. He wasn't sure he could do anything else. And Danny, "Yeah. When this is over, you're going to tell me everything. Every name, every date, every time you looked the other way. You're going to give me everything, and in return I'm going to make sure you don't spend the rest of your life in prison. Do we understand each other?" He understood. For the first time in 18 months, he understood exactly what he'd been part of. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Now go." Danny took Amy Chen down the corridor, away from the East Wing, away from the nightmare he'd helped create. Behind him, he heard sounds, the third contractor emerging from the room, a brief struggle, a cry of pain, but he didn't look back. He couldn't look back, because looking back meant seeing what he'd helped build. And he wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Mara stood in the corridor alone, 2 contractors on the ground, the third zip-tied to a pipe with his own belt. Her breathing was steady. Her hands were still. The mission had changed. She'd come here to gather evidence, to document, to build a case that would hold up in court and bring down the people responsible for whatever was happening at Camp Resolute. But evidence took time. Evidence meant more victims. Evidence meant waiting while someone else got hurt. She was done waiting. She pulled out her phone, not the one she'd been issued as Helen Marsh, but the secure device she'd hidden in the lining of her bag, and sent a single message to a number that existed in no database anywhere in the world. Phase 2. Immediate extraction authorized. Bring everyone. The response came back in seconds. Confirmed. ETA 47 minutes. Mara pocketed the phone and looked down at the contractors at her feet. "You have no idea what you've started," the big one groaned. "No," Mara said. "You have no idea what you've ended." She walked away, leaving them where they lay, and went to find Vincent Cross. Cross was in his office when she found him. The door was unlocked. Arrogance or carelessness, she wasn't sure which. He was sitting behind his desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching something on his laptop that made him smile in a way that turned her stomach. He looked up when she entered, and for a moment his expression flickered with confusion. "Nurse Marsh, it's late. Is something wrong?" Mara closed the door behind her. "Yes," she said. "Something is very wrong." She crossed the room in 3 steps and reached his desk before he could react. Her hand closed around his wrist, the one holding the whiskey, and squeezed. The glass shattered. Whiskey and blood splashed across the desk. Cross screamed. "What the hell are you doing? Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Mara said. "I know exactly who you are. You're the man who's been trafficking women through this base for the past 2 years. You're the man who's been drugging them, assaulting them, and using the evidence to keep them silent. You're the man who's been paying off everyone from the base commander to the security staff to make sure nobody asks questions." She leaned closer. "And I'm the woman who's going to end you." Cross's face went white. "You're not a nurse." "No." "Who are you?" Mara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm the audit." The next 47 minutes were the longest of Vincent Cross's life. He tried to call for help. His phone was dead. He tried to run. The door was locked. He tried to negotiate, to bargain, to offer money and information, and whatever else he thought might save him. Mara listened to all of it. She recorded all of it. And when he was finished, when he'd confessed to everything, and more, she looked him in the eye and said, "None of that is going to help you." "Please," he whispered. "I'll do anything. I'll testify against everyone. I'll give you names, dates, everything. Just don't what?" He couldn't say it. The word stuck in his throat like a bone. Mara stood up. "I'm not going to kill you, Mr. Cross. That would be too easy. And honestly, it would be too quick." She walked to the window and looked out at the base where lights were starting to come on in buildings that should have been dark. "What I'm going to do is much worse. I'm going to take everything from you. Your company, your contracts, your reputation, your freedom. I'm going to make sure that every person you've ever hurt knows that you're paying for what you did. And I'm going to make sure that you live long enough to watch it all happen." She turned back to him. "That's your punishment, not death. Survival. With the knowledge that everyone knows what you are." Cross started to cry. Mara felt nothing. At 03 on 12 hours, the first helicopters arrived. NCIS tactical teams, military police, federal investigators. They came in waves, securing the base, separating the contractors from military personnel, beginning the long process of documentation and evidence collection that would take months to complete. Danny Reeves was among the first to be taken into custody. He went quietly, his head down, his hands shaking. He'd already begun talking, and he wouldn't stop for hours. Amy Chen was evacuated to a military hospital in Germany. She would recover physically. The rest would take longer. And Vincent Cross was led away in handcuffs. His expensive watch confiscated his perfect teeth, hidden behind a split lip he'd given himself trying to escape through a window that didn't open. Mara watched it all from the roof of the medical wing where she'd gone to be alone. The sun was starting to rise over Camp Resolute, painting the sand-colored buildings in shades of gold and orange. It was beautiful in a way. The kind of beauty that felt almost offensive given what had happened in the darkness below. Her phone buzzed. A message from NCIS Command. Excellent work. Debrief in 48 hours. Well done, Commander. She didn't respond. Instead, she stood on the roof and watched the sun rise and thought about all the women who would never have to fear the East Wing again. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But it was something. And sometimes something was all you had. Somewhere below, a door opened, and footsteps approached. Mara turned. Tanya Webb stood at the roof access, her eyes red from crying, her shoulders straight for the first time since they'd met. "They told me what happened," she said. "They told me who you really are." Mara nodded. "Is it over?" "The arrests are over. The trials will take years. But yes, for you it's over." Tanya was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you," she said finally. "I didn't think anyone would ever come. I didn't think anyone cared." Mara crossed the roof and put her hand on the younger woman's shoulder. "Someone always cares," she said. "Sometimes it just takes a while for them to find you." Tanya nodded. Then she turned and walked back through the door, back into a world that would never be quite the same. Mara stayed on the roof until the sun was fully risen. Then she went to start the next phase of her mission. Because this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. The helicopters had barely left the ground when the first phone call came through. Colonel Harris burst into the medical wing at 0647. Hours, his face the color of old concrete. He found Mara in the temporary command center that NCIS had established in what used to be Cross's office, surrounded by agents cataloging evidence. "Commander Sinclair," he said, his voice cracking on her real name. "We need to talk, now." Mara looked up from the laptop she'd been reviewing. Cross's files. Years of them. Names, dates, transactions. The digital fingerprints of a predator who never thought he'd be caught. "Colonel, I assumed you'd want a briefing." "A briefing?" His laugh was hollow, desperate. "I just got off the phone with Washington. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I arrested a human trafficker and his accomplices. I'd say that's fairly straightforward." Harris stepped closer, lowering his voice so the other agents couldn't hear. "Aegis Medical Solutions has contracts worth $400 million. They have lobbyists in every congressional office that matters. They have friends at the Pentagon who golf with the Secretary of Defense." Mara closed the laptop. And they're already calling this a rogue operation. They're saying you exceeded your authority. They're saying the evidence was obtained illegally. They're saying whatever they think will make this go away." Mara stood, and despite being several inches shorter than the colonel, she seemed to fill the room. "But it's not going away. 23 women. That's how many we've identified so far. 23 women who were drugged, assaulted, and silenced by Vincent Cross and his people. On your base, under your command." Harris flinched like she'd slapped him. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know. There's a difference." "That's not fair. Neither is what happened to those women. But here we are." The colonel's shoulders sagged. Whatever fight he'd walked in with had drained out of him. What happens now? Now you cooperate fully with the investigation. You provide every document, every email, every record that NCIS requests. And when the time comes, you testify truthfully about what you saw, what you suspected, and what you chose to ignore. And if I do all that, then maybe you walk away with your pension instead of a cell. Harris stood there for a long moment, aging 10 years in the silence. I have a family, he said quietly. So did the women Cross hurt. Think about that. He left without another word. Mara watched him go, then turned back to the laptop. 23 women, and she had a feeling they'd only scratched the surface. The first witness interview happened at 0900 hours. Her name was Specialist Carmen Rodriguez, 27 years old. She'd been transferred out of Camp Resolute 8 months ago after filing a complaint that had been dismissed as unsubstantiated. She sat across from Mara in a small conference room, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. "You don't have to do this," Mara said gently. "Not today. Not ever, if you don't want to." Carmen shook her head. "No, I want to. I've wanted to for 8 months. I didn't think anyone would listen." "I'm listening." The young woman took a breath, then another. Then she started talking. "It was my 3rd week. I got invited to what they called an appreciation dinner. Mr. Cross hosted them for new female staff. Made it seem like an honor, you know, like you were being welcomed into the family." She laughed bitterly. "The drinks were strong. I remember thinking I should slow down, but everyone kept toasting, and it seemed rude not to participate. And then I started feeling strange, dizzy, like the room was tilting." "You were drugged?" "I didn't know that then. I thought I was just a lightweight. I thought I was embarrassing myself." Her voice cracked. "The next thing I remember, I was waking up in one of the rooms in the East Wing. My uniform wasn't right, and there were photos on my phone. Photos I didn't take." Mara's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "What kind of photos? The kind that ruin your career. The kind that make everyone look at you differently. The kind they use to keep you quiet." "Who showed you these photos?" "Mr. Cross, the next day. He called me into his office and showed them to me on his laptop. He said they'd been sent to him anonymously, said he was concerned about my behavior, said he wanted to help me keep it private." "In exchange for what?" Carmen's hands started shaking. "In exchange for being cooperative, for being available when he needed me, for keeping my mouth shut about what happened in the East Wing. And when you reported it, my complaint got kicked back. Insufficient evidence. They said I'd been drinking voluntarily, that I'd gone to the dinner willingly, that there was no proof anything non-consensual had occurred." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "They had photos of me unconscious, and they said there was no proof." Mara reached across the table and took the young woman's hands. "Carmen, listen to me. What happened to you was not your fault. The system that was supposed to protect you failed you, but that system is going to answer for what it did. Every person who looked the other way, who dismissed your complaint, who chose to protect Cross instead of you, they're going to answer for it. You really believe that? I don't believe it. I know it, because I'm going to make sure of it personally." Carmen wiped her eyes. "The other women, the ones who were transferred out, they went through the same thing. Many of them. We're reaching out to everyone we can identify. There's a list. Cross kept a list. He called it his insurance policy. It's on a drive in his office, hidden in a fake book on his shelf. 3rd shelf, left side. The Art of War. Hollow inside." Mara's pulse quickened. "You're certain?" "I saw him put something in there once, when he didn't know I was watching. I always wondered what it was." 15 minutes later, an NCIS agent cracked open a hollowed-out copy of Sun Tzu's classic and pulled out a thumb drive the size of a thumbnail. The drive contained 347 files. Names, dates, photos, videos, financial records showing payments to base personnel who had helped facilitate Cross's operation, emails from Aegis Medical's corporate headquarters acknowledging the special services being provided at Camp Resolute. It wasn't just Cross. It was the entire company. Mara stared at the screen, scrolling through file after file, watching the scope of the conspiracy expand with every click. Jesus Christ, the lead NCIS agent muttered behind her. This goes all the way to their CEO. Higher, Mara said quietly. Look at this email chain. She pointed to a thread dated 18 months ago. The sender was listed only as DC Office. The content was brief but damning. Resolute operation approved. Maintain discretion. Ensure local command cooperation. Budget authorized. DC Office, the agent repeated. That's their government liaison division. The people who handle their Pentagon contracts. The people who have friends at the Pentagon, Mara corrected. The people Colonel Harris warned me about. What do we do? Mara turned to face him. We do our jobs. We follow the evidence. And we pray that someone in Washington has enough integrity to let us finish what we started. The prayer went unanswered. At 14:23 hours, a black SUV pulled through the gates of Camp Resolute, carrying 3 men in expensive suits and expressions that said they were used to getting what they wanted. Their leader introduced himself as Marcus Webb, no relation to Tanya, Deputy Director of Defense Contractor Oversight at the Pentagon. Commander Sinclair, he said, shaking her hand with precisely calibrated pressure. I've heard a great deal about you. Impressive service record. Truly impressive. Thank you. Which makes this all the more unfortunate. He withdrew a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table between them. These are orders from the Secretary's office. Your investigation is being transferred to the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. NCIS is to stand down immediately. All evidence is to be turned over within 24 hours. Mara didn't touch the folder. On what grounds? National security. Aegis Medical Solutions provides critical support services to ongoing military operations in 3 theaters. A prolonged investigation could compromise operational readiness. A prolonged investigation could also expose systematic sexual assault enabled by a defense contractor with Pentagon connections. Which is the real concern here, Mr. Webb. His smile didn't flicker. I understand your passion, Commander. It's admirable. But there are larger considerations at play. Considerations above your pay grade and mine. 23 women, Mara said. At minimum. That's how many victims we've identified. Are they above your pay grade too? Those women will receive justice. The DCIS investigation will be thorough and impartial. The DCIS answers to the same people who approved Aegis's contracts in the first place. How is that impartial? Webb's smile finally cracked. You're treading on dangerous ground, Commander. Very dangerous ground. The people you're accusing have resources you can't imagine. They've destroyed careers far more distinguished than yours. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. Take the win. You exposed a bad actor. He'll be prosecuted. The system worked. But if you keep pushing, if you try to turn this into some kind of crusade against the entire defense contracting establishment. He left the sentence unfinished. Mara leaned forward. Let me give you a reality check, Mr. Webb. I've spent 23 years hunting people who thought they were untouchable. Drug lords, warlords, terrorists with armies at their command. Every single one of them thought they were too powerful to fall. Every single one of them was wrong. She stood. Your friends at Aegis, Your contacts at the Pentagon. The people who approved this operation and looked the other way while women were being assaulted. They're not untouchable either. And if you think transferring this investigation to a friendlier office is going to make me stop, you don't know anything about me." Webb's face reddened. "You'll regret this." "Maybe, but not as much as they will." The transfer orders were legitimate. That night, Mara sat in her quarters watching NCIS agents pack up evidence boxes under the supervision of Webb's team. Everything they'd collected, the thumb drive, the witness statements, the laptop files, all of it was being loaded into vehicles that would take it to a facility where it would be processed and evaluated and ultimately buried under layers of classification and bureaucratic delay. Cross would probably get prosecuted. He was too exposed now, too publicly connected to the arrests. They'd sacrifice him to make it look like justice had been served. But the rest of them, the corporate executives who'd approved the operation, the Pentagon officials who'd protected it, they'd walk away clean. Unless... Mara picked up her secure phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in 3 years. It rang twice. "Well," said the voice on the other end, "I was wondering when you'd call." "Senator Mitchell, I need a favor." There was a pause. "This is about Camp Resolute. I've been getting calls all day. Very angry calls from very important people." "Good. That means I'm on the right track." "Mara, I have tremendous respect for you. You know that. But what you're asking me to step into, this could end my career." 47 women. Another pause. "I'm sorry. We found more files after NCIS was removed from the case. Hidden backups Cross kept on a personal server. 47 women over 4 years, at facilities across 3 continents. And that's just what one man documented. How many more are there at other Aegis sites? How many more victims that we don't know about?" Silence on the line. "Senator, I've given 23 years to this country. I've bled for it. I've watched friends die for it. And I've never asked for anything in return. I'm asking now. Help me finish this." The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 20. 30. "What do you need?" Mara told her. 48 hours later, Senator Patricia Mitchell stood before a packed congressional hearing room and announced a formal investigation into defense contractor misconduct at overseas military installations. "The allegations we've received are disturbing," she said, her voice steady, despite the cameras flashing in her face. "Systematic sexual assault, corporate cover-ups, and potential complicity at the highest levels of our defense establishment. The American people deserve answers. The victims deserve justice, and those responsible deserve to face the full consequences of their actions." The hearing room erupted. 3,000 miles away, Mara watched the coverage on a laptop in a military hospital room in Germany. Amy Chen lay in the bed beside her, still recovering from her ordeal, but alert enough to follow the news. "Is it really happening?" Amy asked quietly. "It's happening." "Will they actually hold anyone accountable? The big people, I mean. Not just Cross." Mara turned to look at her. This young woman who'd been through hell, who'd been brave enough to survive, who was brave enough to ask the question that mattered most. "I don't know," Mara admitted. "The system protects its own. It always has. But sometimes when enough light gets shined into the dark places, even the system can't hide what it's been protecting. And if it can..." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Then we keep fighting. We find another way. We never stop." Amy nodded slowly. "I want to testify when the time comes. I want to tell them what happened." "You don't have to." "I know. But I want to. For the women who can't. For the ones who are still out there, still trapped in places like the East Wing, still thinking nobody's coming for them." Mara took her hand. Then we'll make sure they hear you. Every single one of them. The phone rang at 0300 hours that night. Mara was still in Amy's room, dozing in the chair beside her bed, when the secure line buzzed. Sinclair. Commander? The voice belonged to her NCIS contact, an agent named Torres, who'd been pulled off the case but was clearly still paying attention. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Marcus Webb, the Pentagon guy who shut us down. He just booked a flight to Geneva, one-way ticket, leaving in 6 hours. Mara was already on her feet. He's running. Looks like it. The Senate investigation must have spooked him. Word is he's got connections to some of the Aegis executives who are about to be subpoenaed. If he makes it out of the country. He doesn't make it out of the country. Commander, you don't have jurisdiction. You don't have authority. If you try to stop him, then I'll add it to the list of things they'll try to charge me with. Send me his flight details. Torres hesitated. You know this could end your career. My career ended the moment I decided to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. Everything since then has been borrowed time. Another pause. Then, flight leaves Ramstein at 0900. Lufthansa connection through Frankfurt. He's traveling under his own name. Arrogant bastard probably thinks no one would dare stop him. Send me everything you have. Already done. And Commander, yeah, get him. The line went dead. Mara looked at Amy, still sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, unaware of the chess pieces moving in the darkness around her. Then she grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. She had a flight to catch. The drive from the hospital to Ramstein Air Base took 47 minutes. Mara made it in 32. She'd borrowed a car from the motor pool using credentials that would probably be flagged within hours. It didn't matter. By the time anyone noticed, she'd either have Webb in custody or be in custody herself. Either way, the clock was ticking. Her phone buzzed as she pulled through the base perimeter checkpoint. A text from Torres. Terminal 2, Gate 14. He's already through security. Flight boards in 40 minutes. 40 minutes. Not enough time to get authorization. Not enough time to coordinate with German authorities. Not enough time to do this the right way, but maybe enough time to do it her way. Mara parked in a restricted zone and walked toward the terminal entrance, her military ID clearing her through the first security checkpoint without questions. The guards barely glanced at her credentials. A Navy commander in uniform wasn't unusual at Ramstein. She was just another officer moving through the system. The second checkpoint was harder. Civilian terminal, different rules. Ma'am, I need to see your boarding pass. Mara looked at the security officer, a young German woman with tired eyes and a practiced smile. I don't have one. I'm here on official military business. Then you'll need to go through the military liaison office. They can arrange. I don't have time for that. Mara lowered her voice. There's a man on the flight to Frankfurt, American. He's a witness in a federal investigation. If he boards that plane, critical evidence in a human trafficking case disappears forever. The guard's expression shifted. Human trafficking. 47 women. Maybe more. This man has information that could save lives and put predators in prison. But only if I reach him before that plane takes off. The guard looked at her ID again, then at her face, then at the determination in her eyes. Gate 14. Yes. A long pause. I didn't see you come through. Mara nodded once and moved past her, walking fast, but not running, drawing attention with speed, but not panic. The terminal was crowded with early morning travelers, business people clutching coffee cups, families herding children, soldiers in uniform heading home or heading out. Mara wove through them, her eyes scanning faces, searching for Webb. Gate 14 was at the far end of the terminal. She could see the boarding area ahead, passengers beginning to queue near the jetway entrance. And there, standing near the window with a phone pressed to his ear, was Marcus Webb. He looked relaxed, confident, like a man who'd gotten away with something and was already planning his next move. Mara stopped 30 feet away and watched him. He was speaking quickly into the phone, his free hand gesturing in short, sharp movements, giving instructions, tying up loose ends. The kind of conversation you have when you're running from something and need to make sure nothing follows you. She could hear fragments of his voice over the ambient noise. Tell them to shred everything. Know everything. I don't care what those lawyers said. If it's not gone by tomorrow. Mara started walking again. Webb saw her when she was 10 feet away. His face went pale, the phone dropping slightly from his ear. You? Me? How did you? He stopped himself, composing his features back into something resembling control. Commander Sinclair, this is a surprise. I bet it is. I'm afraid I don't have time for a conversation. My flight is boarding. Your flight can wait. Webb smiled, but there was fear behind it now. I don't think you understand the situation. I'm a federal official traveling on government business. You have no authority to detain me, question me, or interfere with my movements in any way. If you try, I'll have you arrested for harassment of a government employee. Interesting. What's interesting? The fact that you're running. Mara took another step closer. If everything was above board, if you had nothing to hide, you'd be in Washington right now, preparing for Senator Mitchell's hearings. Instead, you're sneaking out of the country on a one-way ticket to a country with no extradition treaty. I'm on vacation, with one bag and no return flight. Webb's jaw tightened. What do you want? I want you to come back to Washington with me. I want you to testify about what you know, about Aegis, about the approvals, about who knew what and when they knew it. And why would I do that? Because it's the right thing to do. He laughed. Actually laughed. The right thing, Commander. I've spent 30 years in government. You know what I've learned. The right thing doesn't exist. There's only power. Who has it? Who wants it? Who's willing to do whatever it takes to keep it? Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? I sleep fine. Do the women sleep fine? The ones Aegis hurt, the ones whose assaults you helped cover up? For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been shame, or might have been fear of being exposed. I didn't know the details. I approved contracts. I facilitated relationships between the Pentagon and private sector partners. What those partners did with their access, you knew. I didn't, you knew. Mara's voice cut through his denial like a blade. The emails on Cross's drive, the DC office correspondence, you were copied on every single one. You knew about the East Wing. You knew about the appreciation dinners. You knew what was happening to those women, and you approved the budget that made it possible. Webb's face went gray. Those emails were confidential government communications. How did you? I'm good at my job. The boarding announcement crackled over the speakers. Final call for the Frankfurt flight. Webb looked toward the gate, then back at Mara. You can't stop me from getting on that plane. You're right. I can't. She stepped aside. Webb stared at her, confused. What? Go ahead. Get on your plane. Fly to Geneva. Hide in whatever hole you've prepared for yourself. I don't understand. Mara smiled. Those emails I mentioned, the ones you thought were confidential, I sent copies to Senator Mitchell's office this morning, and to 3 journalists who've been covering the Aegis story, and to the DOJ Inspector General. Webb's face went from gray to white. By the time you land in Switzerland, your name will be on every news channel in America. Every document you touched, every approval you signed, every payment you authorized, it'll all be public record. You won't be able to hide anywhere. You're bluffing. Check your phone. Webb looked down at the device, still clutched in his hand. His fingers trembled as he opened his email. Mara watched his expression change as he scrolled. Confusion. Disbelief. Horror. Oh God. There it is. You leaked classified... I leaked evidence of crimes. There's a difference. They'll destroy you for this. Your career, your pension, everything. Probably. Mara shrugged. But they'll destroy you first, and you're the one who has to decide right now. Do you want to face what's coming alone in a foreign country with no protection and no leverage? Or do you want to come back with me, cooperate with the investigation, and maybe salvage something from the wreckage of your life? The boarding announcement came again. Last call. Webb stood frozen, his phone hanging limp in his hand, his face a mask of calculation and despair. If I cooperate, then you become a witness instead of a defendant. You provide testimony about who gave the orders, who knew what was happening, who profited from the operation. And in exchange, the prosecutors might be willing to discuss reduced charges. Might? It's more than you'll get in Geneva. The jetway door began to close. Webb watched it shut, watched his escape route seal itself off. Then his shoulders slumped. I want immunity. That's not my call. Then whose call is it? The Attorney General's. But I can tell you that cooperating witnesses who come forward voluntarily tend to be treated more favorably than ones who get dragged back in handcuffs. Webb was quiet for a long moment. The departure board behind him, updated flight status, departed. I have a family, he said quietly. So did the women Aegis hurt. He flinched. I never wanted. I didn't think it would go this far. Cross was supposed to be. It was supposed to be entertainment, networking, building relationships with the contractors. I didn't know he was... didn't know, or didn't want to know. Webb didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Come on, Mara said. There's a transport leaving for Washington in 3 hours. You can decide on the way what story you want to tell. She turned and walked toward the terminal exit, not looking back. After a moment, she heard footsteps behind her. The flight back to the States was silent. Webb sat in the rear of the military transport, handcuffed to his seat. A precaution Mara had insisted on staring at the metal floor, like it held the answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. Mara sat across from him, watching the shadows shift across his face as the plane cut through the darkness over the Atlantic. Why did you do it? She asked finally. He looked up. Why did I do what? All of it. The approvals, the cover-ups. You had a good career, a family, a reputation. Why risk everything to protect people like Cross? Webb was quiet for a long time. You wouldn't understand. Try me, he sighed. When I started at the Pentagon, I was like you. Idealistic. Believed in the mission. Thought that if I worked hard enough, did the right thing enough times, the system would reward me. What changed? I learned how the system actually works. His voice was bitter now. The contracts, the relationships, the favors that get traded back and forth between government and industry. None of it is about doing the right thing. It's about maintaining the flow. Money and influence out. Everyone gets their piece. And the women. What was their piece? Webb looked away. They weren't supposed to be part of it. The dinners were just hospitality, client relations. I didn't know Cross was using them as hunting grounds. He winced. When did you find out? About a year ago. One of the women filed a complaint. It got routed to my office because it involved a contractor with active Pentagon contracts. What did you do? I buried it. The words came out flat, dead. I told myself it was a one-time thing, an aberration, that Cross would be more careful in the future. But he wasn't. No, he wasn't. Webb's voice cracked. And every time another complaint came through, I buried that one too. Told myself I was protecting the program. Protecting the relationships that kept critical supplies flowing to our troops overseas. You were protecting yourself. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I was protecting myself too. The plane shuddered through a patch of turbulence. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. Can I ask you something? Webb said finally. Go ahead. The women, the ones Aegis hurt. Do you think they'll ever really get justice? Or is this all just theater? A few sacrificial lambs, me. Cross a handful of others while the people at the top walk away clean. Mara considered the question. Honestly, I don't know. The system is built to protect the powerful. It always has been. But sometimes when enough people push back hard enough, the system cracks. And when it cracks, things change. You really believe that? I have to believe it. Otherwise, what's the point? Webb nodded slowly. I used to believe things too, before I learned better. Maybe you learned the wrong lessons. He looked at her, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Maybe I did. The transport landed at Andrews Air Force Base at 1847 hours. There were people waiting. Lots of people. DOJ officials, FBI agents, Senate staffers, a small army of lawyers from agencies Mara had never heard of, and standing slightly apart from all of them, Senator Patricia Mitchell. She approached as Mara stepped off the plane, Webb shuffling behind her in his restraints. Commander Sinclair, I've been watching the news. You've been busy. Senator. Mitchell's eyes moved to Webb, taking in his disheveled appearance, his haunted expression. Is this who I think it is? Marcus Webb, Deputy Director of Defense Contractor Oversight. He has information about the Aegis operation, about who approved it, who funded it, who knew what was happening, and chose to look the other way. Mitchell nodded slowly. And he's willing to share this information. He's willing to discuss terms. I see. The senator turned to address the assembled officials. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have a lot to talk about. Let's find somewhere private. As Webb was led away, Mitchell turned back to Mara. You know they're going to come after you for this. Unauthorized operation, potential security breaches, leaking classified documents to the press. I know. Your career is almost certainly over. I know that too. Was it worth it? Mara thought about Amy Chen lying in a hospital bed in Germany. About Carmen Rodriguez finally telling her story after 8 months of silence. About the 47 women whose names she'd memorized from Cross's files, each one a life that had been shattered by men who thought their power made them untouchable. Ask me again after the trials. Mitchell smiled slightly. Fair enough. She handed Mara a business card. When the dust settles, call me. There might be opportunities for someone with your particular skill set. What kind of opportunities? The kind that involve hunting predators who think they're above the law. The kind that require someone who doesn't give up even when the system tells them to. Mara looked at the card, then at the senator. I'll think about it. You do that. Mitchell turned and walked toward the waiting convoy, leaving Mara standing alone on the tarmac. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of jet fuel and coming rain. Mara stood there for a long moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of red and gold. Then her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have let him run. Now we're all exposed. You have no idea what you've started. Mara read the message twice, then deleted it. Whatever was coming, she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else in her life. Head on. No retreat. No surrender. She walked off the tarmac and into whatever came next. 3 days later, Vincent Cross was found dead in his cell. The official report called it suicide. bedsheet tied to the ceiling vent. No signs of struggle. Mara read the report in her temporary quarters at the Navy Yard, where she'd been confined pending the investigation into her own actions. The words blurred together clinical language that said everything and nothing at the same time. She didn't believe a word of it. Cross had been arrogant, narcissistic, convinced of his own invincibility. Men like that didn't kill themselves. They fought, they schemed, they found ways to wriggle out of the traps they'd built for themselves. Unless someone decided they knew too much. Unless someone was cleaning house. Her phone rang. Torres. You heard? I heard. It's bullshit. The whole thing is bullshit. I know. They're going to close the case. Call it solved. Cross takes the fall, everybody else walks away. Not if I can help it. Mara, they've got you locked down. No phone access, no computer access, no contact with the outside world. How are you supposed to? I still have you. Silence on the line. What do you need? The autopsy report. The cell block surveillance footage. The visitor logs from Cross's facility for the past week. Oh, that's all classified. Then unclassify it. Mara, Torres, listen to me. Cross didn't kill himself. Someone got to him. Someone who's scared of what he might say at trial. If we can show that witnesses are being eliminated, then the whole investigation blows wide open again. Exactly. Another long pause. I'll see what I can do. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. If they catch me accessing those files, we're both going to prison. Then don't get caught. Torres laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really don't know how to quit, do you? Mara looked out the window at the gray sky over Washington. I never learned how. The files arrived 6 hours later, encrypted and buried in an innocuous email about retirement benefits. Mara spent the night going through them page by page, frame by frame. The autopsy was clean, too clean. No defensive wounds, no signs of hesitation. Just a perfectly executed hanging that looked exactly like textbook suicide. But the surveillance footage told a different story. At 02:47 hours on the night Cross died, the cameras in his cell block experienced a technical malfunction. 12 minutes of static. When they came back online, Cross was already dead. 12 minutes. Long enough for someone to enter the cell, do what needed to be done, and disappear. And the visitor logs. 3 days before his death, Cross had received an unexpected visitor. Someone who'd bypassed the normal registration process using Pentagon credentials. The name on the access record, John Dalton. Mara didn't recognize it, but she knew how to find out who did. She picked up her phone and dialed. Senator Mitchell, I need another favor. Commander Sinclair, I was just about to call you. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that changes everything. The senator's voice was tight-controlled. John Dalton? You've been asking about him. How did you know that? Because 2 hours ago, he requested a meeting with the Senate Intelligence Committee. He says he has information about the Aegis operation. Information that could bring down everyone involved, including people at the highest levels of the defense establishment. Mara's heart started racing. He's coming forward? That's what he claims. But Mara, there's something you need to understand. John Dalton isn't some mid-level bureaucrat. He's not like Webb. Then who is he? The senator paused. He's the director of special operations at the CIA. And if what he's claiming is true, this conspiracy doesn't just involve Aegis and the Pentagon. It goes all the way to Langley. The CIA. Langley. The 3 letters that made even senators speak in whispers. Mara sat in her confined quarters, the phone still pressed to her ear, her mind racing through the implications. Commander, are you still there? I'm here. She forced her voice steady. Tell me everything you know about Dalton. 32 years at the agency. Started in field operations, moved to management, climbed the ladder without making enemies. The kind of career that's either genuinely exceptional or carefully manufactured. Which do you think it is? I think men don't rise that high without getting blood on their hands. The question is whose blood and how much? And he's coming forward voluntarily. That's what he claims. He reached out through back channels this morning, said he has documentation proving that Aegis was a CIA front operation, that the trafficking wasn't a side business, it was the main business, human assets being moved through military supply chains. Mara felt something cold settle in her stomach. Human assets? I mean the women weren't just victims, they were products, being trafficked to clients across 3 continents under cover of legitimate military logistics. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. Mitchell's voice dropped. Dalton claims the operation was sanctioned at the highest levels, not just approved, designed, a self-funding intelligence operation that used human trafficking to finance off-the-books activities. Mara closed her eyes. 47 women. That's what she'd thought she was fighting for. 47 victims of one man's depravity. But if Dalton was telling the truth, the number was much higher, and the conspiracy was much deeper. When does he testify? Tomorrow morning. Closed session with the Intelligence Committee. But Mara, there's something else you need to know. What? He specifically asked for you to be present. Mara's eyes opened. Me, why? He said you're the only one he trusts to verify his evidence. Said anyone else might be compromised. That doesn't make sense. He doesn't know me. Apparently he knows enough. The question is, what does he really want? Mara stared at the wall. A CIA director voluntarily exposing his own agency's crimes, requesting her presence specifically, coming forward just days after Cross was murdered in his cell. None of it added up. It's a trap, she said. Possibly. Then why would you want me there? Because if it is a trap, I need someone in that room who can see it coming. And if it's not, if Dalton is genuinely trying to bring down this operation, then I need someone who can protect him. Protect him from whom? From whatever killed Vincent Cross. The hearing room was underground. Not metaphorically, literally. 3 stories beneath the Hart Senate office building in a secure facility that didn't exist on any public floor plan. Mara had to pass through 4 security checkpoints just to reach the elevator. Senator Mitchell met her outside the chamber doors. You look tired. I haven't slept in 3 days. You might want to get used to that. Mitchell handed her a thick folder. Background on Dalton. Everything we could compile on short notice. Mara flipped through the pages. Service record, personnel evaluations, commendations and awards. Nothing that explained why a man at the peak of his career would suddenly decide to burn it all down. Has he arrived? 20 minutes ago. He's in a secure holding room with 2 U.S. Marshals. Did he bring the documentation? 3 boxes of files, flash drives, recording devices we haven't even cataloged yet. Anyone verify any of it? Not yet. That's why you're here. Mara closed the folder. Senator, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Do you believe him? Really believe him? Mitchell was quiet for a moment. I believe that something very wrong has been happening in our intelligence community for a very long time, and I believe that the people responsible will do whatever it takes to keep it hidden. Whether Dalton is a hero or a villain, I honestly don't know, but I know that someone needs to find out. And if he's playing us, then we'll deal with that when we come to it. The doors opened. Mara walked into the chamber. John Dalton looked nothing like she expected. She'd imagined a predator. Cold eyes, sharp features, the kind of calculated menace that came from decades of operating in the shadows. Instead, she found a tired man in his 60s with gray hair and trembling hands. He sat alone at a long table, boxes of documents stacked beside him. Two marshals stood against the wall, hands resting near their weapons. When he saw Mara enter, something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe. Or recognition. "Commander Sinclair." His voice was hoarse, like he'd been talking for hours. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't given much choice." "No, I suppose you weren't." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Please, sit." Mara remained standing. "Let's skip the pleasantries. Why am I here? Because you're the only person involved in this investigation who hasn't been compromised. How do you know that? Because they've tried to compromise everyone else. FBI, DOJ, Pentagon oversight, even some of Senator Mitchell's staff. His eyes met hers. But not you. They couldn't get to you. Why not? Because you don't want anything they have to offer. No promotion, no pension, no political future. You just want the truth. Mara studied his face, looking for the lie. What makes you think I want the truth? Camp Resolute. You could have taken the win. Arrested Cross, closed the case, gone home a hero. Instead, you kept digging. You exposed Webb. You connected the dots to Aegis Corporate. And now you're here, even though being here could destroy what's left of your career. Maybe I'm just stubborn. Maybe. Or maybe you understand something most people don't. What's that? Dalton leaned forward. That the real monsters aren't the men who commit the crimes. They're the systems that create them, the structures that protect them, the institutions that look the other way because looking is inconvenient. He reached for one of the boxes. I've spent 32 years inside one of those institutions. I've watched it grow from something noble into something unrecognizable, and I've finally decided that enough is enough. He pulled out a stack of files and pushed them across the table. This is everything. The Aegis operation from its inception, the funding sources, the client lists, the names of everyone who knew what was happening and chose to profit from it. Mara looked at the files. Why now? Why come forward after 32 years? Because I'm dying. The words landed like a physical blow. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. Amazing how mortality clarifies things. So this is about redemption. It's about making sure the people who built this thing can't hide behind my silence anymore. I'm going to die either way. The question is whether I take them with me. Mara sat down slowly. Cross. Was he killed? Yes. Who ordered it? The same people who will try to kill me before I can testify publicly. The same people who are probably watching this room right now, trying to figure out how to stop what's coming. And who are those people? Dalton looked at her for a long moment. The Oversight Committee. Mara frowned. The Intelligence Oversight Committee, they're supposed to be the ones controlling these operations. They're supposed to be, but somewhere along the way the watchdogs became wolves. They realized that the operations they were overseeing generated enormous amounts of money, black budget money, untraceable, unaccountable, invisible. So they took control. They took ownership. The Aegis operation alone generated $40 million a year, human trafficking through military supply chains, and that was just one operation of dozens. Dozens. Drugs through Afghanistan, weapons through Libya, refugees through Turkey. His voice hardened. Human beings treated like cargo. Processed through systems designed to look legitimate, profits flowing to accounts that no auditor would ever find. Mara felt sick. And the women, the ones at Camp Resolute. Some were trafficked to private clients, wealthy individuals who paid premium prices for discretion. Others were sold to foreign intelligence services, honey traps, leverage operations. They were turned into assets. They were turned into tools, and when they stopped being useful, they were disposed of. Mara's hands curled into fists. You knew about all of this. For how long? 10 years. 10 years. And you did nothing. I did nothing visible, but I documented everything. I waited for the right moment, for someone I could trust. You waited while women were being raped and sold. Yes. He didn't flinch from the accusation. I waited, because moving too soon would have gotten me killed and the evidence destroyed. I needed someone on the outside, someone who could take what I knew and do something with it. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. Mara stared at him. How long have you been watching me? Since Camp Resolute. Since you walked into that base and started asking questions nobody else was willing to ask. You knew I was coming. I arranged for you to come. The revelation hit her like a punch. What? The tip that started the NCIS investigation. The anonymous report about misconduct at Camp Resolute. I sent it. I made sure it would reach the right people. People who would send someone capable. You used me. I gave you an opportunity. What you did with it was entirely your choice. Mara stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. You manipulated everything. The investigation, the witnesses, the evidence, all of it was choreographed to lead here. Not choreographed, guided. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Because at any point you could have walked away. You could have taken the easy win and gone home. But you didn't. You kept pushing. You kept fighting, even when it cost you everything. And that makes it okay that I chose to be your weapon. It makes you the only weapon that could work. Dalton's voice was calm, measured. The others, Webb, the prosecutors, even Senator Mitchell, they're all part of the system. They have things to lose, reputations to protect, futures to consider. He looked at her with something like respect. You don't have any of that anymore. You've already burned your bridges. You've already sacrificed your career, which means they can't touch you. They can't threaten you with anything you haven't already lost. Mara's breath came hard and fast. You're wrong. They can still kill me. Yes, they can. And they probably will try. He pushed the files closer to her. But these documents have already been copied. Multiple redundancies. Multiple locations. Even if they kill both of us tonight, the truth is already out there. Waiting. Waiting for what? For someone to pick it up and finish what we started. The door to the chamber burst open. Senator Mitchell rushed in, her face pale. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The marshals outside. They're not responding. Mara's training kicked in instantly. She moved toward the door hand, reaching for a weapon she didn't have. Stay here, she ordered Dalton. Don't move. The hallway outside the chamber was empty. Too empty. The security checkpoints she'd passed through were unmanned. The usual hum of activity had been replaced by suffocating silence. And then she heard it. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving fast. Mara turned to Mitchell. Is there another exit? Emergency stairs at the end of the corridor. But they lead up to... I know where they lead. Get Dalton. Move. What about you? I'll buy you time. Mara, go now. Mitchell hesitated for 1 second. Then she was moving, pulling Dalton from the chamber, half dragging him toward the emergency exit. Mara watched them go. Then she turned to face whatever was coming. The first man came around the corner 30 seconds later. Black tactical gear. Suppressed weapon. No insignia. No identification. The uniform of ghosts. He saw her and raised his rifle. Mara moved, 23 years of training compressed into a single moment. She closed the distance before he could fire, redirecting the barrel, driving her palm into his throat. He went down, gasping. The second man was right behind him. She took his weapon, used his momentum against him, sent him crashing into the wall. The third man was smarter. He held back, tried to find an angle. She didn't give him one. The fight lasted 12 seconds. When it was over, 3 men lay on the ground, and Mara was holding 2 weapons she hadn't started with. But there would be more. There were always more. She ran. The emergency stairs led up to a service corridor that connected to the main building. Mara caught up with Mitchell and Dalton 3 floors up, both of them breathing hard. "We need to get to the surface," Mara said. "Into public view. They won't risk an operation where there are witnesses." "The main entrance is that way," Mitchell pointed. "They'll have it covered. We need another route." Dalton coughed, leaning heavily against the wall. "There's a maintenance tunnel, connects to the Capitol Power Station, comes out near the East Plaza." "How do you know that?" "I've been planning my escape routes for months, just in case." Mara looked at him. Dying of cancer, barely able to stand, still thinking 3 moves ahead. "Lead the way." The tunnel was narrow, dark, and smelled like old machinery. They moved as fast as Dalton's failing body would allow, which wasn't fast enough. Mara could hear pursuit behind them. Professional, coordinated, the kind of team that didn't make mistakes. "How much further?" 200 meters. There's a junction ahead. Right fork leads to the surface. And the left fork, dead end, literally. They reached the junction. Mara looked back the way they'd come, flashlight beams bouncing in the darkness, getting closer. "Go," she told Mitchell. "Take him up. Get to the press corps. Tell them everything." "What about you? Someone needs to hold them here." "Mara, there's too many." "I didn't ask for your opinion." She handed Mitchell the flash drives from Dalton's pocket. "These are copies of his evidence. Make sure they get to the right people." "I can't just leave you." "You can and you will? Because those documents are more important than either of us." Mitchell's eyes filled with tears. "This isn't how this was supposed to end. Nothing ever ends the way it's supposed to." Mara smiled grimly. "Now go, before I change my mind." Mitchell took Dalton's arm and pulled him toward the right fork. He looked back at Mara one last time. "Thank you," he said, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet. You still have to testify." "I will, I promise." Then they were gone, swallowed by the darkness. Mara turned to face the approaching lights. She had 2 weapons, 24 rounds total, and no idea how many enemies were coming. The odds weren't good. But then again, they never had been. She raised her weapon and waited. The first shot came at 0847 hours. The last one came at 0852. 5 minutes. That's how long it took. When it was over, 4 more men lay in the tunnel, and Mara was slumped against the wall, blood seeping through a wound in her side. She could hear sirens in the distance. Someone had finally noticed something was wrong. Her phone buzzed. A text from Torres. "Mitchell made it out. Dalton is with federal marshals. Evidence is being broadcast on every network." Mara smiled. Then she closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. The beeping was the first thing she heard. Steady. Rhythmic. The electronic heartbeat of machines keeping track of her survival. Mara opened her eyes slowly, fighting through layers of fog that felt like swimming through concrete. Her mouth tasted like copper and antiseptic. Her side burned with a pain that told her she was still alive. "She's waking up." Torres's voice. Close. Worried. Mara turned her head. The movement sent lightning bolts through her nervous system. Torres sat beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw covered in stubble that had crossed from fashionable into neglected. How long? Her voice came out as a croak. 4 days. You lost a lot of blood. Doctors weren't sure you'd make it. Dalton, safe, federal protection. He testified before Congress yesterday. Mitchell, fine. She's been here every day. Just stepped out to take a call. Mara let her head fall back against the pillow. The evidence. Torres laughed. It was a tired sound, but genuine. Everywhere. Every network, every newspaper, every social media platform on the planet. The Oversight Committee is done. 3 senators have already resigned. The CIA director stepped down this morning. The Attorney General announced a special prosecutor an hour ago. And Aegis dissolved. Federal agents raided their headquarters 2 days ago, found another 200 files Cross didn't even know about. The whole thing is unraveling. Mara closed her eyes. It was over. After everything, the lies, the cover-ups, the bodies in the tunnels, it was finally over. Hey. She opened her eyes again. Torres leaned forward. You did it. You actually did it. We did it. No. He shook his head firmly. I made some phone calls and broke some rules. You walked into a gunfight with nothing but borrowed weapons and held off a kill team long enough for the truth to get out. That's not the same thing. I got shot. You got shot saving democracy. There's a difference. Mara almost smiled. That's dramatic. It's accurate. The door opened. Senator Mitchell walked in, phone still in her hand, her expression caught somewhere between exhaustion and triumph. Commander, you're awake. Apparently. Mitchell pulled a chair close to the bed. I owe you an apology. For what? For asking you to walk into something I knew might get you killed. Mara considered that. Did you know? I suspected. The moment Dalton reached out, I knew there were people who would do anything to stop him. I sent you anyway. You made a tactical decision. I used you as a weapon, just like Dalton did. And I made my own choices, just like I always have. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. The president called this morning. He wants to give you a medal. Tell him I don't want it. I already did. He's going to give it to you anyway. Of course he is. Mara shifted in the bed, wincing at the pain. What happens now? Trials. Lots of trials. Webb is cooperating fully. Dalton's testimony is damning. We've identified 17 members of the Oversight Committee who knew about the trafficking operations and either participated or looked the other way. 17. That we can prove. The real number is probably higher. And the women, the victims. Mitchell's expression softened. We've located 43 of the 47 from Cross's files. Most of them are willing to testify. Amy Chen is leading a survivor advocacy group. She's become quite the spokesperson. Good. That's good. There's something else. What? Mitchell pulled out her phone and handed it to Mara. On the screen was a news article. The headline read, Camp Resolute Whistleblower Speaks Out, She Saved My Life. Below the headline was a photo of Tanya Webb, not the broken woman Mara had met in the hospital hallway, but someone transformed, standing straight, eyes clear, voice strong. She's been telling everyone what you did, Mitchell said. How you listened when no one else would. How you believed her when the system told her she was crazy. Mara stared at the photo. I didn't save her. She saved herself. That's not how she sees it, and it's not how the other women see it either. Mara handed the phone back. What do they want? They want you to know that it mattered, that what you sacrificed wasn't for nothing. The words hit harder than the bullet had. For 23 years, Mara had operated in shadows, doing things that couldn't be acknowledged, saving people who would never know her name, fighting enemies that history would never record. She'd never asked for recognition, never expected gratitude. The mission was enough. The mission had always been enough. But hearing that it mattered really mattered to real people whose lives she'd touched. Something cracked inside her. Something she'd been holding together for longer than she could remember. She felt tears running down her face and couldn't remember the last time she'd cried. "Hey." Torres's voice was gentle. "You okay?" "Yeah." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Yeah, I'm okay." 2 weeks later, Mara was discharged from the hospital. She walked out the front entrance into a crowd of reporters, cameras, microphones, thrust toward her face like weapons. Questions shouted from every direction, overlapping into meaningless noise. Torres was beside her, trying to clear a path. "Commander Sinclair, is it true you're being considered for the Medal of Honor?" "Commander, what's your response to allegations that you violated classified protocols?" "Commander, do you have any comment on the Oversight Committee arrests?" Mara stopped walking. The crowd fell silent. "I have one comment," she said. Every microphone pushed closer. "The women who were hurt by this system, the ones who survived, and the ones who didn't. They're the story, not me, not the politicians, not the trials. Them." She looked directly into the nearest camera. "If you want to honor what happened, honor them. Tell their stories. Say their names. Make sure the world knows what they went through, and why it can never happen again." She started walking again. "That's all I have to say." The crowd parted. Mara walked through without looking back. The months that followed were a blur of testimony and trials. Mara appeared before 7 different congressional committees. She gave depositions to federal prosecutors. She answered the same questions hundreds of times in dozens of different ways, until the words lost all meaning and became just sounds she made with her mouth. Webb pleaded guilty to conspiracy and obstruction. His cooperation bought him a reduced sentence, 15 years instead of life. Dalton died 3 months after his testimony, the cancer finally claiming what the assassins couldn't. His funeral was attended by 17 people. Mara was one of them. Marcus Webb's Pentagon connections were dismantled one by one. 14 officials faced charges. 9 were convicted. The others resigned in disgrace, their careers and reputations destroyed. The Oversight Committee was dissolved. A new structure was created with civilian oversight and mandatory disclosure requirements. Whether it would work any better than the old one remained to be seen, and Aegis Medical Solutions ceased to exist. Its executives scattered across the globe, some to prison, some to countries without extradition treaties. The company's assets were seized, its contracts canceled, its name erased from government records like it had never been there at all. But the women remained. 43 survivors scattered across 3 continents, slowly rebuilding lives that had been shattered by men who thought their power made them gods. Amy Chen became their voice. She testified before Congress. She appeared on news programs. She wrote articles and gave speeches, and refused to let the world forget what had happened. Carmen Rodriguez went back to school. She was studying law now, specializing in victims' rights. She wanted to make sure other women had advocates who understood what they'd been through. Tanya Webb left the military and started a support organization for survivors of sexual assault in the armed forces. Within a year, it had chapters on 37 bases across the country, and Mara watched all of it unfold from a distance, proud and heartbroken in equal measure. The medal ceremony was held at the White House. Mara stood at attention while the president read from a prepared statement about courage and sacrifice and the eternal vigilance required to protect democracy from its enemies. She wore her dress uniform for the first time in years. It still fit barely. The medal was heavy, bronze and gold and ribbon, the kind of thing that looked important and felt meaningless. When it was over, when the cameras stopped flashing and the dignitaries stopped shaking her hand, Mara found herself alone in a corridor outside the East Room. Senator Mitchell found her there. "You look uncomfortable." "I hate ceremonies." "I know." Mitchell leaned against the wall beside her. "That's why I wanted to catch you before you disappeared." "What do you need?" "I have a proposition." Mara raised an eyebrow. "The new oversight structure needs leadership. People who can't be bought, can't be intimidated, can't be compromised. People who have proven they'll fight for what's right even when it costs them everything." "You want me to take a desk job?" "I want you to build something new. A unit that answers to no one except the people. A watchdog with actual teeth." "And who would fund this unit?" "Congress, directly. No intermediaries, no black budgets. Complete transparency." Mara was quiet for a long moment. "I'm 52 years old. I've been shot, stabbed, and nearly blown up more times than I can count. I have arthritis in both knees and a titanium plate in my shoulder. I'm not exactly prime recruitment material. I don't want a soldier. I want a conscience, someone who will look at the system and see what it's really doing, not what it claims to be doing. And if I find something I don't like, then you burn it down, just like you burned down Aegis." Mara looked at the medal in her hands. 23 years of service, countless missions, countless sacrifices, all leading to this moment, standing in a corridor of power, being offered a chance to reshape the very institutions she'd spent her life serving. "When do I start?" Mitchell smiled. "Yesterday." 1 year later, Mara stood at the head of a conference table in a building that didn't exist on any map. Around her sat 12 people. Former military, former intelligence, former law enforcement. All of them hand-picked. All of them tested. All of them committed to the same simple principle: no one is above accountability. "We have a new case," Mara said. "Defense contractor, operating in Southeast Asia. Reports of forced labor and human trafficking through military supply chains." She clicked a button, and files appeared on the screens in front of each team member. "Sound familiar?" Torres. Her deputy now leaned forward. "Different company, different location. Same playbook." "Exactly. They think they've learned from Aegis's mistakes. They think they can hide better, cover their tracks, better protect themselves better." She looked around the table. "They're wrong." The team began reviewing the files, asking questions, mapping connections. The familiar rhythm of investigation and pursuit. Mara watched them work, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive hope of youth, but something harder. Something earned. The hope that came from knowing that even when the darkness seemed overwhelming, there were people willing to carry lights into it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Amy Chen. "Saw the news about the new unit. Proud of you. Keep fighting." Mara typed back. "Always." She put the phone away and turned her attention to the mission. Because somewhere out there in a facility nobody was watching, women were being hurt by men who thought their power made them untouchable. And Mara Sinclair was coming for them. Not as a soldier, not as a spy, not as a weapon wielded by someone else's hand, as a force of nature, unstoppable, relentless, righteous. The system had created her, trained her, tried to use her and discard her when she became inconvenient. Instead, she had turned that same system inside out and rebuilt it from the ashes. She was the living proof of a simple truth that predators always forgot the hunted can become the hunter. And when they do, no amount of power, no amount of money, no amount of political protection can save you from the reckoning that follows. Mara Sinclair wasn't just a survivor. She was justice itself walking in human form. And her work was just beginning. What would you do if you discovered the people protecting you were the ones hurting others? Would you stay quiet for safety, or risk everything to expose the truth. Stories like this happen every day, hidden behind closed doors and classified files. The only difference between fiction and reality is whether someone has the courage to pull back the curtain. If this story moved you, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. And remember, silence protects predators. Speaking up protects everyone else. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the next Mara Sinclair might be watching right now, waiting for permission to become who she was always meant to be. I'll see you in the next one.